Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Welcome to Game Over Montreal. I am Andrew Berkshire, your host for the evening, and most evenings when it's not Marc Dumont stepping in for me, which will be happening a lot more actually in February as I'm going to take some time off. But what a game the Montreal Canadiens just played. You wouldn't guess it from the shot counter, but I think that doesn't really tell the story of the game tonight. Specifically, Raphael Harvey-Pinard. We're going to talk about him a lot tonight because what a coming out party for that young man, and what a great story he is in general. And we're going to talk about Kirby Dach, who was a menace tonight, and all sorts of other stuff. The return of Jake Allen, who was once again very sharp against the Detroit Red Wings. I don't know what he hates about the Red Wings. Maybe it was, starting his career in St. Louis, but lots to talk about tonight between missed high sticks and caught high sticks and follow-throughs and all that. But first, I got to tell you guys that we're going to welcome in one of our favorite guests in a moment. Lori Bennett is here. It's been a while. There have been some times where Lori was supposed to come on and then I couldn't do it or she couldn't do it. So I think the last time she came on was when Nick Suzuki's mom came on, actually, Amanda. So it's been a while. I'm really excited to hear from Lori. But before we bring her in, think you know which way it's going to go? Make your bet with Sports Interaction. Whether it's hockey, football, or basketball, Sports Interaction has you covered. Bet pregame, live in play, or on one of our many prop bets. Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all sports betting has to offer. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. All right, let's welcome in our guest, Lori Bennett. How are you?
I'm well, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing great. Mostly. Tired.
Mostly great. The weather in Montreal, I think, is much like it is here in Toronto.
Yes, we got totally, I want to say drenched, but it's not the right term. We got piled on.
Yeah.
But it's okay. That's part of living in Canada. It's part of life here. It comes once in a while, but I prefer the big dumpings of snow to happen in the afternoon instead of overnight. Because when I got to wake up in the morning and try to get my oldest to school for 7:50 in the morning, that's a tough thing to do. You have to shovel.
That is a tough thing to do. I don't know. I live in a condo, so I don't have to shovel too much, but once in a while I get caught somewhere where I need to shovel. But I remember when I lived on the East Coast, my favorite part of snow shoveling was shoveling out, going inside to get ready for work, coming back out to discover the plow had buried you back in and you had to start all over before you go to work. So hopefully you didn't have to tackle that this morning.
Yeah, it's something you got to deal with. It's just the way it goes. It's all right. It's not a big deal.
Canada.
Exactly. You get the old massage gun out and get it on your back after. It's all right. But I want to talk. Let's start the show. We're going to talk about Raphael Harvey-Pinard a lot, but I want to save it a little bit because I just want to stew on it and let people think about it more because he's just so exciting tonight. I want to start the show with a talk about Kirby Dach because I don't know if you watched the video that the Canadiens posted a couple days ago now, I think, Lori. It was Kirby Dach mic'd up at practice, and it was clearly earlier in the season because there were guys in that practice who are currently on the injured list. But it was pretty funny, specifically a part where Dach is going around talking about how he's having the greatest practice of his whole life. He's scored 6 or 7 times in this makeshift scrimmage they're having, and he's so confident. And he's kind of watching the puck, turns around, and he runs straight into Martin St. Louis, who's standing still at center ice. But he's standing still with his feet right beside each other, not planted in any way that gives him stability, hands in his pockets. And he ran right into Martin St. Louis, and Dach is the one who almost falls over. And St. Louis just kind of takes a half step back, and he's like, watch where you're going.
Yeah, I did see that. It was, he barely moved him. It was pretty fun. He's looking good. He's not just having good practices anymore. He's playing. He's delivering on the ice. He's looking great.
Yeah, and we had a comment here. I can highlight comments now on the stream, which is kind of fun. They show up on the YouTube thing. We had a comment here. I'm just going to grab it, talking about how Dach has started to grow into his big boy body, which is true. I mean, I don't know when it happened, but something happened with Doc relatively recently. Here, I'm going to throw that up on the screen for everybody from K 22 Paper Dolls, saying Doc is finally settling into that big boy frame. I have a feeling it had something to do with some of the hits that he's taken lately, but all of a sudden, Kirby Doc, I don't think he ever lacked physicality. I think his physicality came through like protecting the puck. That's what he has really excelled with all season. But he's been taking no prisoners lately. Like, he is throwing the body.
There was one game, a few games ago now, where he just skated through somebody on the blue line. I forget who it was, but the guy tries to stand him up, and like he just kept going, and like just barreled him over. I forget which defenseman it was, but he's just been he's figured out how to use his size in a way that's different. And I think part of that is confidence, to be honest. Earlier in the season when he's playing wing for Suzuki, and everyone's like, oh, like they've traded for this center and now they're turning him into a wing, and another center in Montreal playing wing. And of course, whatever, like, the biggest benefit of that at that time, I think, was that he was able to find his confidence. There was no pressure with playing center, and he was playing with two guys who definitely lacked no confidence. And I think it was good for him. And I think it was good for him to maybe miss playing center a bit, and maybe miss leading his own line. And he's looked fantastic. It was a lot of fun. Like, I was blown away that he just dropped his gloves tonight and then laid out. Yeah, like, I'm just sitting there going, like, is this really Kirby Doc? But he's a big kid. Like, he can handle himself if he needs to, and that's not been the direction he's gone in. But he looks like he's ready to go there now.
Yeah, it seems like he's becoming like that fully rounded player that everyone wants him to be, right? And I don't think we all want Kirby Doc dropping the gloves every couple games. Like, he doesn't need to be Arbor Jack guy, who we also don't want to be fighting every single game. But it is really cool to see him stand up for himself in that way. And I know that he might get a call from NHL Player Safety and get the $5,000 fine, the maximum allowable under the CBA, for his little half slew foot in the second period there, which I don't know. To me, it looked more like a push than a slew foot, but the fact that he went out there and got the guy who hit him from behind a little bit dirty. Exactly, right? Like, you kind of love the revenge stuff. And when somebody can stand up for themselves instead of counting on Arbor Jack guy to do it, it adds something to the team as well.
Like, for years, fans are talking about, bring in Delorier, or bring in some other player who, can carry, can fight if they need to, defend the players if they need to. And I've never been convinced the Habs need a goon, or not to call Delorier a goon. I mean, he brings a little bit more than a goon, I guess, but just like, it's been so long since the Habs have had players who can just stand up for themselves, who won't be pushed around and are able to push back. And once in a while, show them I'm not going to be intimidated. I can drop the gloves if I want to. It's not how I'm going to play, but I will if I need to. And that's been a nice change this season.
It has. And Ramelli in the chat says that Doc built his confidence playing with Suzuki and Cole. And I fully agree with that in terms of his offensive confidence. But I think a lot of the good things in his game were present right off the start of the beginning of the season.
Oh, for sure.
When he was playing center, he like the puck control. It's just that things weren't necessarily generating offense. And then he realized how gifted offensively he could be playing with those two guys when they were just lights out, right? And now he doesn't need them anymore, which is
he's carrying
pretty great.
Yeah, he's looking good. He's looking really good. And the whole debate that's happening now, I don't know if you've seen much of this online, but who's going to be the true 1C? Will Doc be better than Suzuki? Is he going to outscore Suzuki even this season? And I'm thinking, like, to me, it's like going to like a top class steakhouse and saying, now, which is better? Is it your baseball steak, or is it your tenderloin? Like, well, they're really good steaks, and it depends on what you're feeling. And by the way, we got several other steaks on the menu that are also pretty good. the Habs are allowed to have more than one good center. They don't have to be in a competition together, except for a healthy competition. But when the Habs fans have been so deprived of strong top six centers in Montreal that now it's like, oh, it must be one of them that's going to be really. I think that by the time this rebuild's done, we're going to have 3, maybe 4 guys who can play solid center in the top 6 in Montreal.
Yeah,
That's where I see this going.
And that's what's so exciting about what's going on right now, right? I mean, even just this last draft, I don't know if Philip Michar is going to end up playing center in the NHL, if he makes the NHL, if things pan out for him properly. I think he looks like an NHLer when you watch him, but this whole idea of who's going to be the number one center, I think it's a little bit one of those situations where you're comparing somebody who's ice cold to somebody who is red hot, and it's just not a fair comparison. And the pressure that's put on Nick Suzuki versus Kirby Dach is just completely different. There's such a difference between being not only the captain, but also the first guy called upon in literally every single situation. Yeah. I can't get there with the people who want to I know you don't need to knock Nick Suzuki by saying you think Dach might be better, but it kind of feels like knocking on Nick Suzuki right now from a lot of sectors of Habs Twitter. And I think this is something that I wanted to talk about as well. If there's anyone on this team who is currently playing injured because the Canadiens just don't have anybody left to bring up to the NHL, it's Nick Suzuki.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's got no pop in his skating right now whatsoever.
Yeah, there was a spot in the 4-on-3 in overtime where he wasn't in a wide open shooting lane, but it was the kind of spot that earlier in the season, Suzuki probably would have, opened himself up a bit and taken a shot. There was no one really in front of him. He would have found the lane and took the shot, but he just passed off. And to me, there's something not quite right there with Suzuki. But how short are our memories? Do you remember earlier in the season where he was just scoring at will? And for me, it's 2 different centers. It's 2 different guys which is exactly what you need in your top 6. You need, everyone talks about the Suzuki Caulfield combination. Oh, does Caulfield belong with Dach now? I hope we get to a point where we're not talking about who must play where. I hope we get to a point where in the top 6, people are versatile and interchangeable, and every night the opponent is wondering how they're lining up tonight and who are we going to have to shut down tonight. That's when we'll know the rebuild went well.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing about and this is a great comment from Mark Dumont, who says, even if Nick Suzuki's not scoring, he does about 100 or 1,000 crucial things a game in the neutral zone, right?
Yeah.
You look at the power play. When does the power play function? It's when Nick Suzuki gets the puck into the offensive zone, right? He's the guy who continually has to do all of that work. I'm just trying to reorient the screen capture for the comments, because when people put long comments and I highlight them, it just cuts them off. But now everyone can see Mark's comment. But Suzuki, he brings so much more to the team than just production, from his quiet leadership capabilities, his defensive tendencies. I really like Kirby Dach, but I think the way fans should look at it is less like Suzuki versus Dach and more like whether it's going to be Fantilli or Bedard or whoever as the 1C, and then it's going to be Suzuki, Dach, and either Beck or Evans or Meshar, whoever. That's your competitive 1, 2, 3, 4 that gets you a Stanley Cup.
It is. And you look at the rosters of other Cup teams, and they had other guys in their top 6 who could play center. They didn't have the true left wing, center, right wing. They had, you think about, the thing I always say is if Malkin can play wing, if Draisaitl can play wing, so can Suzuki or Dach or Bedard or Fantilli or Dubois or whoever it is, Will Smith or Dvorsky or whoever winds up in Montreal come summer. I think they're gonna be loading up with guys who can be more versatile in that top 6 or in that top 9, and that's when they'll be that's when they'll be ready to contend.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you there. Now, there's a comment here from Kay. She's no, it wasn't that one. It was talking about Nick Suzuki and whether or not he's injured right now. Should the Canadians be trying to find someone to just fill time so that he can sit out? I think that, like, there's so much talk about the Canadians medical staff right now, and we had Rachel Dory on last show, and she talked about Adam Douglas, who's the Canadian strength and conditioning coach, because that sector of the Canadians has been highly criticized recently. You know, you missed 990 man games to injury in the last year and a half. That makes sense. You're going to get some questions, but he is in the NHL circles, like the number one most respected person in that frame of work. Yeah. So I think we're seeing a lot of end result, and we don't actually have the information to make judgments on a lot of this stuff. Like, Suzuki could be injured right now in a way that isn't going to get worse from playing. There are injuries that happen that happens, right? Yeah. Like, he just have a couple sprained muscles in his legs or something that are preventing him from having that first step, you know? But also, in a season like this, you want to be able to sit guys who are injured, so you're not risking anything. But in Suzuki's case, it's not like you have to find some guy to fill some minutes. You have to find 25 minutes.
For sure. And, you know, like the other thing to keep in mind was they have 2 more games before they're off for 11 days. Mm-hmm. Suzuki's not going to be at the All-Star game breaking his neck. Like, you know, that'll be a rest for him as well. And, you know, then, I mean, once we're back from, maybe even before, I think there will be some bodies that are coming back in trades. There will be salary dumps that come back that fill positions. There will be, you know, teams won't be able to take on giant contracts from the Habs without sending back a player here and there. And that'll be fine on expiring contracts or lesser contracts than what they're giving up. So maybe there will be some reprieve. I mean, Monahan's coming back shortly. He'll be around for a few games before he goes to Colorado. Then you know, like, we'll see what happens from there. But maybe some rest will be enough for Suzuki to be in a different space. I don't think he's playing on an injury that they're gonna make worse so that they kill his career on this. That's probably just something that's quite uncomfortable to play with right now, and some rest will be good. Hopefully.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think people were kind of freaked out by the suddenness of Cole Caulfield being shut down, right? Yeah. But I think we all have to look at the factors that went into that. Number one, the new contract's coming up. I would assume that Caulfield getting the surgery now to be ready in time for next season was something that the Canadians heavily pushed through his agent to, like, let's get this done now, and then we'll sign the contract. And also, you know, if you're monitoring him constantly and something changes, then you pull him out. That is still good medical practice. You know what I mean? It's easy to see it from afar and say, like, there's something going wrong here, but we don't have access to that kind of information, so it ends up being just speculation. And Kay actually had another good comment here saying, like, yeah, there's only a couple games left before the break, but a couple of them are against the Ottawa Senators, so that's like 5 games worth of injuries.
That's a good point. Those games can get a little nasty. Yeah, I mean, it's hopefully it won't be too nasty, and he'll be able to get to a break soon. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with Nick. The thing with Caulfield, I mean, you know, I don't think it's accidental that just, like, you know, that they announced he was out on Saturday, was it? And then the Wednesday right before, Kent Hughes is doing his presser and says, you know, we might have to get better at, you know, getting players not to screw themselves over. He didn't say it that way, but do a better job of working with our players to take better care of themselves or whatever, make decisions for themselves for the long term or whatever. I forget exactly how he put it, but you know, I'm sure that Caulfield was in his mind. I'm sure they were aware at that point. They were watching an injury to see where it would go, and no doubt Caulfield wanted to play. He was still scoring and still, like you couldn't tell from his play on the ice, certainly, that he was hurting. So no doubt he wanted to continue, but, the right decision got made in the end. So, and,
Yeah.
the joke I always make with that is, this isn't the same as, Shea Weber playing on broken legs for however long and, playing at like 10% of his capacity and looking like a pylon on the ice, because he's hurting all season long, and then being on medication, serious medication to get through playoffs where he looked great. But that's not where we are with this. It's, he looked good. It was a short-term injury, and now he's having surgery. If it was the previous regime, probably would have played him all season and announced his surgery in July. That he'd be coming back in February or something, right? Just so that this is improvement.
Yeah, it is, and I think a lot of the frustration comes from, I don't want to say PTSD because I feel like that's like not it's minimizing something that's like a real serious condition, but
for sure,
the sports version of that, like the tiny little bit of it, where people remember things like you see the frustration with Slavkovsky and they're comparing it to Kotkaniemi. Like Kotkaniemi wasn't playing or working with a skills coach every day, right?
Yeah.
And you see the Cole Caulfield thing and they're looking at like Carey Price and how many times he came back from injury too early, injured himself again, Shea Weber playing through injuries. And I think after watching that cup run in 2021 and seeing like Carey Price essentially, like I know he played 5 games, but essentially never came back. Shea Weber never came back. Paul Byron came back for a short stint and he looks done. Eric Stahl missed a whole year. And I think I'm missing a player as well. Brendan Gallagher has never been the same, right?
No.
Like those guys sacrificed either years of their career or their career entirely to make that cup run happen. So people are looking at recurring injuries or big injuries and they're freaking out. And I totally understand that, but we got to put everything in context. Speaking of freaking out about injuries, people are talking about Joel Edmondson in the chat.
Yeah.
So
I'm hoping it's an ingrown toenail that just got too uncomfortable and he decided to call it a night.
Like maybe he tried to like catch a puck and his finger went backwards a little bit or something. I don't know. I'm thinking it's probably not serious and maybe he got a stinger and they decided it's not worth it, but that would really burn if the Canadiens lost Joel Edmondson and couldn't get a pick for him.
I was freaking out all last season. Every time I saw Sherratt, decide that he was gonna, there was one night Sherratt fought last year, getting close to the deadline, and I wanted to locate him and throat punch him. It's like, knock it off until once you're traded, you can fight whoever you want. And I was, promoting that, move him quickly and deal with avoid the injury thing. But I think with Joel Edmondson, that's a real risk. I mean, Sherratt has been a pretty healthy player, and it worked out just fine. It worked out really well, actually. But I worry about Edmondson and worry about whether he has the longevity to get a return. That's
I think
one player I'd like to see to move quickly.
If it's anything but his back, I feel like I'm not that concerned.
100%. They said it's lower body, so unless his back got grew, unless part of his injury was that his back dropped to his lower body.
Yeah. Well, and
it should be fine.
When Rachel was on the show a couple days ago now, she was talking about how like one of the leading causes of foot injuries in the NHL is players know that there's really nothing protecting the top of your foot on your skates. Even if you're wearing like the shot blockers, it's just kind of fabric on the top. So players kind of like use the heel of their stick and jam it down on top of skates. Maybe he just got one of those and it hurt, like when you get it across the top of the bones of your foot. Could be a stinger, got a little swollen, decided to take the rest of the game off. Yeah, Habs confirmed it's lower body, so hopefully not lower back. That's all I'll say on Joel Edmondson.
Did they actually say lower body or LBI? Because we gotta be careful with those things.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? They said lower body, but Yeah, Simon Laramie in the chat's asking who is the guest. It's Lori Bennett. She's Lori 10 Habs on Twitter. She writes about the Canadians for Rec House Press and her own blog, and is a great follow on Twitter. So check her out. She's really smart, and you'll enjoy her commentary. I promise. Before we get to the Raphael Harvey Pinard love, because we are going to get there, I do want to make mention of Justin Barron because he looked fantastic tonight. And I know the numbers probably don't look amazing because the Canadians didn't own the puck very well tonight. But if there was anybody who was on their game, who was making good play after good play after good play, it was Justin Barron, especially in the first period.
I really liked this trade, and I fall into the category of those people who loved Lehkonen and loved that hated that he didn't get enough love in Montreal, and his timing seemed to be poor. That the kind of player he was, Habs didn't have the players to go with him, and Colorado really, really did, and they're using him perfectly. But I like the return they got for him. I liked the Justin Barron deal. Sidney Crosby thought it was was really surprised that Colorado let him go. So I've been wanting to see him shine, and was disappointed with his camp, but certainly he's looked great since coming back, particularly in the last 3 or 4 games. I think that his upside is higher than most fans appreciate just yet.
I agree.
I think he's going to be solid.
It's his offensive game that's come so far this season that has like surprised me. I knew he had like a good shot, and like we talked to a couple scouts last season, they were like, yeah, probably a defensive defenseman might chip in 20 points a season. I think he's got a lot more than that in him, especially if he can get some second unit power play time, which, he probably deserves with the defenseman that they have on the club right now. I am very impressed with him. I feel like his game against the Jets was kind of the coming out party. I think he had 3 primary assists in that one, playing against his brother. And always brings the best out of you to go up against a sibling, and both of you get mad at each other, all that stuff. But he has just taken it to another level in recent games, and I know a lot of that has been, he was put with Edmondson when he first came up, and Edmondson was still playing god awful hockey.
Yeah.
And it sucks that he got injured now, but I feel like Edmondson the last couple of weeks has steadily been getting much better. The mental mistakes have not been as present, so that has also helped Barron acclimatize.
I think the future of Barron is probably with Gouli. That's my guess, and I know that everyone has Gouli pegged as 1D. Yeah, maybe he is. I see potential for that pairing. I think that there's a nice complementary skill set there. Either way, I think Barron's top 4, and I think he's probably potentially your second unit on the power play. I think that's his potential in the next couple of years, and I think we're going to be surprised by his capacity. So I'm glad to see him look good, because if he came back and struggled again and ended up going back to Laval, I'd be worried about I'd be worried about his confidence and feeling a little bit that it might hit him harder than would be healthy at this stage. But he's looked great.
Yeah, he really has. All right, let's talk about Raphael Harvey Pinard. We've made them wait long enough. I got a text a few weeks ago asking when the Canadians are going to call up Raphael Harvey Pinard from somebody who works for another NHL team. And they were saying, this kid deserves to be called up. He's done everything he needs to do at this level. He's an NHLer. And I was like, wow, I know he's had a good AHL career, but I didn't know that he was to the point where he should definitely be in the NHL. And the guy was like, yeah, the closest comparable that he could think of was Michael Bunting. He was like, this guy has the potential to be another Michael Bunting. I was like, that's a really lofty comparison.
It is.
I saw that tonight.
That both his goals were they were different goals, certainly, but they spoke to different aspects of the skill set. He's not just the crasher and banger. Like
No.
he will get goals like that, but he's got good hands and he can skate. And I think that's they call him Lavaliger, is it?
Lavaliger, yeah.
I think he has potential to be better than Gallagher. And Gallagher certainly brings something else in terms of his defensive game and the possession game. That's a different skill set that's served the Habs really well for a long time. But in terms of offensive skill, I think it's possible that our HP is he has potential to be better than Gallagher in the offensive zone. The thing I liked about them tonight, not just him, but the line, and I think it's been something that Montreal has struggled with this season is they've never had a true fourth line that knew what they were. And tonight they played with 11 forwards and and had a line that understood their role as, whether you call them 3.5 or whatever they are, but they understood their role differently. And I think most fourth lines we've seen play in Montreal this year, because they've had so many forwards. You've had guys like Hoffman and Dodonov and other guys that Armia and the list goes on and on. Drouin, players who don't see themselves as fourth liners. That's not where they want to be playing. And Evans, and then of course Slafkovsky spent a lot of time there with Evans and Zeta. That wasn't exactly an ideal setup either. There's something to be said for having guys cast appropriately, and that's not to say that I think Raphael's ceiling is fourth line, but those guys know how to play together, for starters, because of their time in Laval. But they knew what their role was tonight, and they played it, and it served them very well. They looked fantastic. The forecheck was fantastic. The back check was fantastic. And the Habs defense, it rather enjoyed having that line come back and play as a 5-man unit differently than perhaps some of the other lines have played of late. So good for the kid. He looked great.
Yeah, he did. And I don't want to take anything away from Pizzetta or Belzile, who have been excellent as well. But I think it's clear that Harvey Pinard is the one with the most highest ceiling
for sure
among those three.
He's the NHLer out of the three. Let's be honest. I think Belzile knows who he is. I think Pizzetta, I've never really seen him as truly being an NHL player certainly not on a good team, but he's played his part well this year, and he's been a good teammate, and he's looked good in the last few games. He's getting more ice, and he's looked good for him. That's not where Pinard will stay, certainly, but for tonight, they were cast well, and they did what they had to do. And that's what you want, right? Is guys that can play in whatever role you put them in. You need a handful of those players on every team that can play in whatever role they're put in. And I feel like he's that player.
Yeah. And there was a comment earlier in the show that I've highlighted here from Trizak that asked if the energy fourth line is a better fit for Marty's style of coaching over the quote unquote talent fourth line. And I don't necessarily, I think it's a comparison that gets drawn because Pizzetta is on that line right now, but I don't think the issue with the fourth line for most of this season has been like, putting too much talent on there and they need to be energy guys. I think what Lori was hitting on earlier is like, they were trying to fit square pegs in round holes. Like Jake Evans is a defensive two-way center, but he wasn't scoring for most of the season. He kind of only just got going right before his injury. And then you had Pizzetta, who's kind of like a mucker and a grinder. And you have like Slafkovsky or Hoffman or Dodonov, who wants to do like high skill plays.
Right.
Nothing fit, nothing meshed.
Whereas it just didn't fit. For all
as these three guys, they know where they're going to be on the ice. Yeah. Belzile knows, like, I need to make simple plays that have a high success rate. And Pizzetta knows, same thing, forecheck hard, back check hard, hit guys hard, and Harvey Pinard, just his competitiveness is incredible. In all areas of the ice, but especially in close to the net. I can't believe he got that backhand off for his second goal and roofed it like that.
Beautiful.
Incredible skill. Yeah. So I don't want to diminish their skill by saying they're like just energy, but they absolutely bring energy.
They do for sure. And, like maybe the next Habs skill line will be, will play with energy. But, I think if you have a fourth line in Montreal next year that has Ilonen and Harvey Pinard and whoever at center, whether that's Evans or, Owen Beck or whoever, and you're able to bring a different, like that could be a skilled line, but it's about how they fit together, and those guys won't mind playing fourth line if they see in front of them is three lines that are stronger, and you're just rolling lines, and they're getting their opportunities. And that kind of line could dominate other fourth lines in the NHL. So I don't see needing to have that, the old school energy line that, just crashes and bangs and, kills time and wears down the opposition for the next line to come out. But yeah, it's about fit. And I think the Habs, I don't think when they began the season, they ever envisioned having so many misfits for as long as they did.
Yeah.
I think they imagined being able to move some guys, and that just hasn't been the nature of the market this season. So
yeah, apparently our bosses here on SDPN on the latest SDP, which I haven't listened to yet, had been slandering Raphael Harvey Pinard, and according to Kay, called him an NPC, a non-playable character. So I guess they had to eat that when he scored against Toronto, and I think they'll continue to eat that comment. If Steve is right now very sick, so I'm not going to bug him about it, and Adam will be asleep, so maybe I'll text Jesse and ask him about the NPC and the 3-point night tonight. I mean, Toronto, you can't rely on them for good analysis,
You can't. They really only watch a couple of guys.
Exactly. They only know Toronto stuff. They don't know anything about the league. That's the way it goes. Yeah, so I think with the fourth line, it's definitely all about fit. And I think like having an energy fourth line that can score is 100% valuable, right?
For sure.
And I think that the way the league is trending is more having like all four lines that can score. But I think we shouldn't confuse that with having four lines that play the same way, right?
Sure.
Like if they have three players that fit together, like Belzile, Harvey Pinard, and Pezzetta are playing right now, they don't have to play the same way as Nick Suzuki and Kirby Dach. They can score their own way.
Right.
And I think that teams that can do that, I think are way harder to match up against.
There are fans tonight after this game that have the Habs offering contracts to Pezzetta and Basile, so they can reunite that line for all of next year with a fantasy that they'll play every game next year like they did this year tonight. Like, and that's not likely.
No.
It's and frankly not a very lofty dream for the team. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think every team needs a handful of guys that can play anywhere. They're maybe your fourth line or your third line, but if someone goes down, they're not going to hurt you. Lehkonen was that guy. He could be effective on the fourth line or any other line, and go out there and adjust his game for whoever. And I feel like it's possible that Harvey Pinard has that in him, that he will go out and play that fourth line role if he needs to, and still bring himself to it. But then if you need to promote him because God knows somebody's leaving the game with an LBI, then he can do that. Yeah, so I think I see him having a nice future there, but he's probably the one out of that line that's there's probably the list of guys on that roster tonight that probably don't have a future in Montreal is significant. That's when you think about that.
Yep.
Yeah. And there were guys who started this season knowing they had no future in Montreal. And then we ragged on them all season. That's got to wear on you, right? That's got to wear on you that I'm on a team that really doesn't want me. They've got me here only as long as they've got to have me. And then they're offloading me to the first team to come along. Like and then we expect them to go out and bleed for us. That's a bit of a psychological challenge for most of us, I think. But
yeah. I think you could look at guys like Dodonov, right, who do a lot of things well, and then when it's time to go into the corner, especially in the first half of the season, I feel like he's there now. He's playing hard now. Better. But the first half of the season, where when the underlying numbers were good, you watch him on the ice and how often he would shy away from doing what he needed to do. You could see some of that mental aspect playing. We're like, do I have to?
Yeah.
Like, what am I competing for here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's tough. I feel like that's why you see, like, when you put the veterans in the fourth line, it just hasn't been as effective. Whereas these kids who are fighting for something, like
Right.
Belzile, every game that he's in the NHL is a gift.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's
Exactly.
pushed so hard for so long for this kind of opportunity. And Harvey Pinard knows, like, he's not going back down. I know for a fact that if he gets to waiver eligibility, there are multiple
They're not.
teams they're waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not going to put him through waivers.
No.
Um, I think he's probably, like, when you think about it, if they are able to move some guys this season, combined with the injury, they can't afford to send him down. For that matter, like, they don't have enough bodies. But I think they're kind of, at the beginning of the season, when both Gordon and Hughes talked about having guys that they were hoping to find new homes for, and not quite in that language, but they talked about the guys in Laval knocking on the door, that they wanted to open roster spots for some young guys who had done their time, kind of thing, and were ready. And I think Harvey Pinard is one of those guys that they had in mind. That I don't think he's probably going back to Laval. I think he's made his
No.
leap, and that's good for him.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great story. I think him and Ylönen are
However it is to
not.
say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't get my head around
Yeah.
saying it properly. But neither of those guys are going back down to Laval anytime soon, or maybe ever again. Maybe they'll paper them down if they're still eligible,
Yeah.
because Laval is like pushing towards a playoff spot.
Sure.
Because that's
Yeah.
always fun to be able to go play in the playoffs. But yeah, there's a question here from Simon Laramie. Highlight that there. It says, who do you think has a higher potential, Harvey Pinard or Ylönen? I think they're relatively similar, but I think Ylönen has a higher potential because he has a better two-way game. But I think Harvey Pinard might score quite a bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think Ilonen, whatever, however you say his name. I think he's struggled each time he's come up. This time he's looked, not struggled, but he hasn't really blown anybody away. He's looked good this time.
Yeah,
Like,
he
he
has.
looks like he belongs this time. And not that he's ever looked bad. I don't mean that, but um, he if he's playing with Doc, he looks like he fits with Doc. If he's playing on a lower line, again, I think he has a little bit of that potential to fit in where he needs to. And these are guys that won't cost you a bundle, that are good to have in your lineup for a bit. And I think, a little bit like the like the comparison I made with Doc and Suzuki. I think they're different players, and the best thing that can happen for the Habs is that they can play together. If the two of them can play on a line together and be effective, and fill in the bottom six, that's good news for the Habs.
100%. And I will say one more thing before we close out the show. For those who are worried about Nick Suzuki, I think we have to put in context the way that he's playing right now, right? And it's not just that he's lost both Doc and Cole Caulfield in the last couple of weeks here. He's also playing with Anderson and Rem Pitlick, and both of them have been playing their hearts out the last couple of games. Anderson just ended his, I think, 3 or 4 game goal scoring streak. Pitlick ended a game in overtime the other night, playing hard. I think he had 2 games in a row that he scored. However, both those guys are among the worst defensive players in the entire league, and now they're playing
Yep.
top line minutes, and Suzuki has to carry the bag for both of them, and he looks injured. And
Yeah, I find that choice interesting, to be honest. That trio, I keep, every time the lines come out for each game, I keep waiting for that trio to be split, and it hasn't happened yet. I know the options aren't exactly plentiful. I imagine that, I think it's quite possible that when Monahan's back, he's playing with Suzuki. That's my hope on it. But but yeah, I mean, like, yeah, no offense to Pitlick or Anderson, who both look good. Pitlick could have ended the game again tonight in overtime if he looked forward instead of back the whole way. Like kept looking
He
behind
wanted
him.
Doc
Like, the
to
net's in
catch up
front
to
of you,
him
pal.
so bad.
Yeah, the net's not back there, my friend. Keep like look ahead. Just keep going. And he's a skilled player. If he probably could have ended it tonight. But I like Pitlick a lot. But as you said, neither of those players is blessed with defensive skill, and they're facing tough competition. It's it might be nice to see if Monahan comes back and plays with Suzuki and Anderson. Maybe that could look different. I'm not too worried about Suzuki at this point.
No, we know who he is.
We know who he is. Look at the roster. It's a rough crew there right now.
And like just for context, Pitlick and Anderson tonight against the Red Wings, 25% on the shot attempt differential. Nick Suzuki, 38%. So in the few shifts that he was away from them, quite good. Quite good. So I'm just not worried about Nick Suzuki. I think we'll figure out the best way forward with him, or the Canadiens will figure out the best way forward with him very soon as players get healthy, and maybe he'll get some time with guys like Ylonen or Monahan or Hoffman. Just give him something a little bit different of a look instead of just like, it seems like they're like looking at Anderson and Pitlick to just have speed going and like speed.
Yeah, it's a bizarre trio to me. Like it doesn't, but and it hasn't, like, I keep waiting for it to work to see what it is that Marty sees in it, and it's not happening for me yet.
It was great against Toronto.
Well, but Anderson was like, every once in a while, Anderson has one of those games where it doesn't matter who he's with; he's just steamroll, and that seems to happen a lot against Toronto. So I don't know if that's a fair assessment, but and Suzuki had a strong night that night, but yeah, it's they're short. They're in dire straits with the number of guys they have, and making line combos when you don't have 12 forwards is more of a challenge.
It is, absolutely. All right, one last thing before we close up shop for the night. Kay and Claire Capoletti said that Cole Caulfield has said that he's speaking with the media tomorrow. So, prediction, Lori, contract extension?
Maybe, though. I'm one of two things. I hope it's the contract extension. It wouldn't surprise me if it's related to all of the questions that are being asked about, whether the team let him play too long, and he's coming out with his sort of, here's how it unfolded. Nothing particularly dark and twisty happening here. Just how it unfolded. Let's hope it's the contract extension. Let's hope it's both. Maybe it'll be both.
Who knows? Maybe he's going to come back sooner than he thought. And 8 years. That's all I ask. 8 years. I don't think anybody in this organization is foolish enough to do a bridge deal with Cole Caulfield. But having watched it happen the last one, it's that same, nattering in the back of your head, right? The Kokniemi thing, the Carey Price thing, and you're like, don't do it.
Don't do it.
I think it'll be 8 years. All right, everyone. Thanks to Lori for joining me here tonight. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Always fun to chat with both our guest and the amazing people in the chat. Super fun. Noel and Kay are both giving me credit for the great guests this year. Of course, Lori was here last year as well, because we knew right away we're bringing back Lori after how great she was several times last year. And we're excited. There's only a few more games left until the Canadiens take a break. And February is going to be light on the games for me. I think I have, let's see, it'll be mostly Mark. But I've got games on until the next couple of games here. I'm going to be here. Mark's going to be on next show against the Senators on Saturday. Then it'll be myself and Ian Boisvert on Tuesday, the 31st of January. And then I have the 14th, 16th, and 18th, which is going to be our Hot Ones Gauntlet with Adam Wilde, which I'm super excited about. Then I have a small little surgery that I'm getting right here, and I'll be out until March. So there'll be a lot of Mark Dumas on the show, so you got to show him love. And before we close up shop, Lori, tell everyone where they can find your work.
So I'm Lori 10 Habs on Twitter, habhatter.ca for my Habs blog, and wreckhousepress.com for a weekly sports column.
Absolutely perfect. Everyone, thanks for coming out. We'll see you on Saturday.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.